Hi, I'm Mike, an educator with the New Mexico Museum of Space History. Today, you are going to get to do an exercise where you attempt to bring an astronaut safely back to Earth after his mission is over. A lot of really smart people in the early years of the space race had to figure this out. Now, the object that's going to be your astronaut is an egg. And if you don't put the proper protective gear on him and padding in the capsule, well, your astronaut might find himself a little bit splattered on touchdown. I say he because America's first astronauts, 7 of them, were men. The NASA program that sent them up was called Mercury, named after the mythological Roman god. Of several things over which he, Mercury, had control were travelers and communication. And what are astronauts but travelers who are communicating their findings? Thus, the first astronauts were called the Mercury 7. Today, men and women are astronauts, and they have all contributed greatly to our understanding of space. There are a lot of other materials you'll use, and actually these will somewhat vary depending on the type of materials you want to try. In science, we call this testing. That's how we find out what works and what doesn't work. If your project doesn't function exactly right, or maybe not the first time, that isn't necessarily failure. It's just eliminating one possibility and moving on to the next until success is achieved. Let's get started. We'll begin with the capsule itself. I'm going to try both a cup and a small cardboard box. Each is different, and because of that, each astronaut will have a different experience. The color of the cup doesn't matter, this is just what I happen to have in my cupboard. You'll need a seat. I'm using a water bottle and a thicker vitamin-type bottle. They don't have to be clear, but when you open up the capsule, you'll find out pretty quickly if the astronaut survived. You will be cutting these to size, therefore adult assistance is necessary on this part. That seat will need cushioning, so I'm using a section from an egg carton. One will be a styrofoam carton, the other thicker cardboard. Cut each out like this. The styrofoam is lighter and less protective. It might crack, but in doing so, absorb the shock which otherwise the astronaut would absorb in his or her body. In a real space capsule, the heavier the rocket and total package, the more force is needed to escape Earth's gravity. That means costs skyrocket. Lighter material is often preferable if it works for the safety of the astronaut. The cardboard is thicker. It likely will not crack, but the shock wave of hitting the ground could travel through the material and injure our astronaut. When Ham, the chimpanzee, was launched, he was secured into what was called a couch, which was fitted to his little body. A thick layer of shock-absorbent material cradled him. Once adult astronauts climbed into capsules, they had larger seats. Cushioning protected the chimp and the astronaut from heavy acceleration forces during liftoff, such as being on a roller coaster that accelerates instantaneously at high speeds. Not to mention the abrupt shock of the water splashdown. Imagine yourself in a car that is hit and you come to a sudden stop. That can be pretty painful. The air-powered daisy track on display at the New Mexico Museum of Space History was used to learn what might be the best cushioning for astronauts, specifically the Apollo program, when they splash down into the ocean. Yes, water might be better than hitting solid land, but have you ever done a belly flop? I have, and that can be pretty painful. The daisy track used both anthropomorphic dummies and humans. Dummies weigh about 200 pounds each and simulate a full-grown human man. But men also rode the daisy track, as you see here. Shortly after being propelled down the track, they were brought to a sudden and bone-jarring halt using a water braking system, just like doing a belly flop. You'll need packing material. I have on hand newspaper, plastic grocery store bags, or other types of plastic material. You might feel a rag is worth trying. Aluminum foil, styrofoam pieces, and bubble wrap. By the way, you'll likely be using the bag not just for packing, but as a parachute as well. So make sure you have string on hand. It's your choice what type of string. You could even try yarn. I'm using this thicker cord because I don't want my astronaut to go into freefall on the way to Earth. Other materials you'll definitely need: duct tape. Oh, and a marker. The color doesn't really matter, but you'll want your astronaut to have a face. If you really want to simulate a Mercury astronaut, here's a link to their images. Just print, cut, and glue. To be historically accurate, Deke Slayton, who is second from the left in the bottom row, did not fly with Mercury. A heart issue grounded him until 1975 when he flew the Apollo-Soyuz mission. This was the very first time American astronauts and Soviet cosmonauts docked in space and spent time together orbiting Earth. Now, set these aside for a moment, and let's see how astronauts returned to Earth at the beginning of our space age. This historic film features the mission of John Glenn, the first American to orbit the planet Earth.
Glenn takes his place in Friendship 7, looking towards the unknown. Ready. Mercury Atlas is ready, and so is the astronaut.
Snorkels are open. Main chute is on green. Chute is out in reach condition at 10,800 feet and beautiful chute. Hello, Mercury Recovery. This is Friendship 7. Do you receive? Friendship 7, this is Steelhead. Be advised, I have you officially... Roger. What is your estimate on recovery time? Over. Estimating pickup now at 20 minutes. Over. Landing bag is on green. Friendship 7, ready for impact. Almost down. Here we go. Okay, does the capsule look like it's okay? Over. The capsule looks good from here. Over.
Home. To Earth comes the Voyager. Transported now to the aircraft carrier Randolph. In 4 hours and 56 minutes, John Glenn has streaked through 3 days and 3 nights and over 81,000 miles. Never a journey so far. Never a traveler so welcomed by the world.
Let's get started. The seats. First, I'll be cutting the seats to fit my capsule. Ask for adult help with this, and be sure to wear thick gloves. You want to cut the material and not your skin. I've drawn my astronaut faces, so in they go. A bit of material around the egg provides additional cushioning. Now the seat material goes into the capsule. Here's where you decide what type of cushioning to surround the seat. Your goal is to be precise. Don't just stuff the material in. Everything has to have a purpose, not stuffed as an afterthought. You'll seal the capsule with duct tape. And just so you remember, these are what our astronauts look like going into the mission. And now it's time to pack our capsules. Remember, I'm making two. You can do that. You can make just one. The first one is the red cup. I'm adding styrofoam so that when the astronaut hits the ground, even with a parachute, it might be rough, he or she doesn't pop up and hit his or her head. I'm sure you've done that. It's not a very pleasant feeling. For the box capsule, I'll be using a rag for cushioning, placing plastic on either side so the astronaut won't be rolling around, top that off with newspaper, and then seal it shut before adding the parachute. Designing your parachute is next. It has to billow out, as shown in this image of a capsule descending to splashdown. Attach the string to the parachute and then use duct tape to secure the string to the capsule. Our box parachute is a little bit different. We're using a different kind of plastic material, and we're attaching it in a different way as well. Once again, remember, you're the engineer in this exercise. You can design the capsule and the re-entry package however you like. And now it's launch time. The higher up we can get, the better simulation your astronaut will experience. So join me. Let's step out onto my second floor balcony. We are go for launch. We have winds about 10 to 12 miles an hour. Down right there is our target area. We have our first astronaut in the red cup. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, we had pretty good parachute deployment. And so let's send our second astronaut. Here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That was a little rougher. So we should probably go down and see how they're doing. Cut away the parachute. And it appears that our astronaut has survived. He still has that smile on his face. A little bit of a hard landing, but it appears to have worked very well. Now, let's go up to the second astronaut. That one had a little bit better chute deployment, so we have high expectations for his well-being. And we have an intact astronaut as well. He looks a little more shell-shocked, but he did survive. We are back in our astronaut preparation area, and both of our astronauts are very happy to be here. This one had a pretty soft flight. His parachute deployed well, and he came down without too much problem. This astronaut, he landed a little bit rougher, but you can see from all of our preparation that the packaging we inserted made all the difference in the world, and he was able to walk away from his landing as well. And now it's your turn. You're the engineer. You choose your materials, you design your cockpit, you design your seats, and launch. Godspeed for your launch. And thank you for joining us from the New Mexico Museum of Space History.